Alrighty, ladies and gentlemen, it is time for us to have a bit of a difficult discussion today, and that is going to be focused on Denia and what I consider to be her massive team building issue that's going to arrive with her release in version 3.3. And the conversation that we're having today is focused on one main issue, and that is going to be flexibility on the roster. I feel like Denia is releasing, especially after Linnae, Denia is releasing as one of the more restricted units that we've ever had in the history of the game. And the best way for me to describe that to you is, of course, to kind of like break down, just in basic detail, what her two main forms actually are. So if you go ahead and you go through Denia's like kit overview over here, you'll see something very, very, very specific in one inherent skill. And that basically tells you, hey, she's got one resonance mode over here that's focused on the fusion burst archetype. She'll buff fusion damage, and then she'll have another form over here where she's focused on tune strain, and then, you know, give things like a tune break boost, so on and so forth. And you can see some of the more, you know, fleshed out details of that shown in her outro skill over here, where she amplifies fusion burst damage. And then, of course, if the resonator that she's supporting inflicts tune strain shifting, she gives them 40% all damage amp. You can see that that's how her two roles are built out. And they make sense. Unfortunately, guys, Denia is releasing, and she might have some of the lowest number of teams in the game, despite being a character that feels like they're a 2-for-1. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. The main big issue that I see with Denia over here is actually the wording that you see on this inherent skill, etched colors. The main issue that I have is with the tune strain mode. All resonators in the team gain 10 tune break boost. That's the baseline effect. And if you're interested in knowing what tune break boost does, it's probably easiest for us to take a look at a character like Luke Herson. So tune break boost, specifically for Luke, is going to do a couple of things. It's going to make all of his damage do more damage because of how tune strain works. You can see it over here. Each point of Luke Herson's tune break boost increases his total damage against the target by 0.12%. So that's where the damage buffs are coming from. But then tune break boost also gives Luke Herson damage amplification too, up to 30% if he's got, you know, a decent chunk of like 60. And so having more tune break boost is really, really, really good for a character like Luke. And so naturally, you can already see why she might be his best in slot. However, Kuro Games decided to throw a wrench into this implementation over here. When a resonator in the team has an off-tune buildup rate over 100%, every 10% over that increases the resonator's tune break boost by 8 up to 40. So this buff actually is supposed to give 50, but to be able to get the full 50 that you're getting from this buff, guys, you need to have a Mornier on your team. You need somebody that buffs your tune break boost to 50%. And Mornier, ladies and gentlemen, is the only character in the game that is able to buff your off-tune buildup rate. So look over here. You got one character in the game that's able to buff off-tune buildup rate by 50%. You need Mornier to make Denia's main damage buff work. Tune break boost is the main damage buff in the tune strain team. And to have access to it, ladies and gentlemen, you need Mornier. So that sets one team solidified over here. We're using Encore as a substitute for Denia over here. This is one of the teams that are set up. But naturally, pretty much every other team that was planning on combining Denia with Luke just got a massive fucking nerf. All of these teams effectively just lost like 40 points of tune break boost, which is a huge amount of damage, and of course, a huge amount of damage amplification as well for Luke Herson, because of that inherent skill that we saw in his kit. It just feels like having a restriction like this doesn't necessarily make the most sense to me. Because A, this team is already going to be very, very, very strong. Mornier already has a ton of built-in damage buffs, right? Specifically with her interfered marker, which requires an enemy, right, to have tune strain on them or Toon Rupture interfered on them, and then their damage taken is increased by up to like 40%. That's already there. And so Mornier was always going to be the best in slot for these Toon Break lineups in the first place because of her massive damage buffs. And all we've done over here is essentially widen the gap even further between not having Mornier on the team and having Mornier on the team. You can substitute the Shorekeeper for pretty much any other fucking limited or any other support, not even limited ones. And they're so much worse after the fact than they are with the Mornier. And you want to know what the most tragic thing about this is? You already know at a baseline, right? That Denia is the premier Toon Strain support. I would not be surprised if her shit is so under-tuned because of her reliance on Mornier that this lineup over here, Shorekeeper, Denia, Luke, might actually be weaker than this one. Which is fucking crazy, but there's a chance that that could actually occur. And if that's the case, good golly gee, I feel like they must have really, really, really fucked up Denia, and they must have fucked her up pretty goddamn bad. Because it's not like you're going to be able to just straight upgrade her, or upgrade your Luke Herson team, right? By putting a Denia on it. You're going to have to make sure that Denia and Mornier are both on it. And guess what that does? That just makes Mornier essential to another team. And that obviously makes it right so that there's even less flexibility when it comes to how you're arranging various characters on your roster than you might have had before. And I feel like that's a bit of an annoying addition to the game, where like pulling a new character makes others feel even more restrictive. But that's the unfortunate reality of how Denia's kit is operating right now. And the unfortunate thing is, guys, is that Denia is also kind of like a generalist Toon Strain support too. You can see over here, her outro skill just reads, the incoming Resonator has all their damage amplified. So Denia is meant to work with future Toon Strain DPSs that come out in the future. That is obvious. There's nothing we can really get confused about over there. However, to fully support any other Toon Strain DPS that comes out, she's gonna have to be with Mornier. Do you see what the issue is over here? Way less roster flexibility. Now it's just gonna be these two tied together for, I guess, Toon Strain characters of every single archetype. Much like how, I assume, it's gonna be these two characters tied together for every sort of like Toon Rupture archetype that we got going on. And I feel like that's just kind of, this might end up with like more restrictive roster building than we had actually thought. And I would have simply just much preferred if this little restriction over here that requires you basically to have Mornier in the team for Denia to give her full buff to her DPS, I kind of just wish that one was not there. And I just think it's really unfortunate that it is. Now it's time for us to have another conversation over here, and that's going to be about how restrictive I feel like her Fusion Burst form is going to be. And I don't think we really need to have that complex of a conversation over here. Everyone knows that Chisa has been on deck and that Chisa has been waiting for an opportunity to work with Imeth for the longest period of time. Right? That much is kind of like obvious over here. And when Denia releases, Chisa, Denia on Fusion Burst form, and then Imeth on Fusion Burst form is probably going to be the strongest, one of the strongest Imeth teams in the game. However, what are the chances that you're going to be able to use this Fusion Burst form of Denia anywhere else? You're probably going to be stuck to Imeth permanently. And I think the only teams that you might have available to play are these ones. One, where you substitute Chisa out and you put in like a Lupa instead, which like might work, but you're also going to be sustainless. And I feel like Lupa, you'd rather use her with like a Galbraida or something. You'd rather use her in like any other team, and you kind of do want Chisa here. Or you do some fucking curse shit like this, where like you run like Lupa, Denia, and then like a healer DPS hybrid dude like Brant over here. Because this is essentially what we're leveraging over here. Denia's also going to give a 30% fusion damage bonus for existing. That is a capability in her kit. 30% fusion damage bonus for merely existing. You combine that with the actual capabilities of this kit, 25% fusion damage bonus over here. That makes it 55. And then this one, the passive bonus is 12%. 67% fusion damage, or yeah, 67% fusion damage bonus, which is quite a lot. And so, if Denia's coming in, buffing with an outro skill, right? And then also providing Brant a 67% fusion damage bonus alongside all the other bonuses that like Lupa over here is like providing and shit. Hell, who knows, ladies and gentlemen? Maybe this stuff is going to be really, really, really strong too. Right? Because you get the 15 from here, get all the bonuses from here. I think this is like 18% attack, and then this is going to be like 20% fusion damage bonus, and then this is like 15% fusion resistance ignore. Maybe this team is good too. But just count the number that I'm pointing out for you guys. 1, 2, 3, but you're probably not going to play this because it's sustainless and kind of fucking dumb. 3 or 4, I guess, but you're going to feel really bad playing this team because it's just going to feel so much worse than using a Mornier. Like, half your damage is going to be gone. And then you maybe got this one. But in all the other lineups, guys, what are you noticing? These are all, like, Giga Premium characters. There's nobody even, like, close to affordable that you can use. This character is like the Antichrist. You can't use a Varina at all. I don't even know what budget character you're allowed to use with Denia. I don't know which budget character you're allowed to use with her. You're fucked. Because, like, if Shorekeeper's already feeling fucked over because she doesn't have the off-tune build-up rate and she's losing all the damage bonus for Luke, how do you think a Varina's gonna feel? Why can't we replace SK with Mornier? Did you not see me show off the team with Mornier at the start? Okay, never mind. What's the main point that I'm trying to make over here, guys, is that this unit is going to be way more disappointing than you might have actually realized, because there's almost no teams in the game you could actually build with her. They're all variations that are branching off of using, like, 2 characters. Luke Herson and Imeth. And then maybe a little bit of Brant thrown in because we're using his healing ability. And Lupa. But that's pretty much it. And do you want to know what the main sort of issue is with having that many restrictions? She has that many restrictions while also requiring, 1, a unique Sonata set for both of those modes, and of course, all the Echo rolls involved. Because Chromatic Foam only works on her Fusion Burst form. You need to be able to inflict Fusion Burst to activate this set. Imeth's Tune Strain mode does not inflict Fusion Burst at all, so this doesn't work. Second, for her Tune Strain mode to work, ladies and gentlemen, right? The one that we're using with Luke, her Fusion Burst form can't activate this one at all because you need to be able to inflict Rupture or Strain. And only her Strain mode inflicts Strain. So you need 2 unique Sonata sets for her to work with only like 2 real DPSs. And then in with those 2 real DPSs, she's hard locked to Mornier to work with Tune Strain. And then she's basically hard locked to Imeth to work in Fusion Burst. If I'm going to be honest over here, it's kind of like they took Chakota and like Phoebe and they combined them into one unit. We're like, Phoebe only works with Zani. And then Chakota is needed for Cart to work, but she can sort of work in other teams. Denia needs Mornier in her Tune Strain team to basically function as a character. And then she needs Imeth, but they can maybe do a couple of other things in fusion teams because she passively provides that 30% fusion damage bonus. And of course, Chromatic Foam, the set she uses, the passive on Chromatic Foam, it provides so many buffs as well. But other than that, guys, I'm just going to be honest. This Denia unit over here might be like the most premium pull we've ever had in the history of the game. And somebody asked this question. What about free-to-play teams? Don't even fucking think about free-to-play teams if Denia's in the conversation. If you're pulling Denia and then thinking about free-to-play teams, you are on crack cocaine. Literally crack cocaine. She does not have a single free-to-play team. If you want to play Toon Strain teams, you want Mornier. Free-to-play's gone. If you want Fusion Burst, you gotta get Amenth. Free-to-play's gone. If you're using her with Verena, you break your account. I'll say that to you first. If you're using this Denia unit with like a Verena, a Shorekeeper, a Galbreda, fuck it, a Linnae, a Sagrika, you break your account. Because you should not be getting anywhere close to this character unless you fulfill a couple of criteria. One, you have Amenth, and you're also thinking about pulling Chisa. If you only have Amenth, I do not recommend pulling this character. Having just Amenth, not enough of a reason. Mainly being, Amenth can already be supported by this blonde over here. Second criteria, you also need to have Luke Herson. But if you have Luke Herson, you also need to have Mornier. So let me correct that. You need Luke Herson and Mornier to fulfill the second criteria. And you also need to have a second team for your Linnae. Because you want to know what the just unfortunate circumstance of this team is? Yes, you could just fucking put in Linnae here too, and the team performs just fucking fine. So even if you have these two characters, you will have no need at all to pull a Denia unless your Linnae is busy. And chances are your Linnae is busy, right? Because maybe your Linnae is busy over here. Or maybe your Linnae is busy, I don't know, over here. But chances are your Linnae is going to be busy. And so if you want your Luke to have a best in slot with Mornier, that's what you can do. However, does your Luke already clear using this? Does your Luke Herson already clear using a San Juan and Mornier? Chances are, probably, yeah, he probably already does. So you're going to want A, Luke Herson and Mornier, and then B, feel the need to improve over a San Juan. And if you've already kind of like done that, or if you already don't feel the need to improve over a San Juan, then you've already killed the reason to pull her. And C, for the third criteria when it comes to pulling this character, it's like, are you ready to spend a lot of resources and get very little out of it? Are you ready to essentially brick your account just to have this unit? Because think about the fact that you're building two Sonata sets. Two unique Sonata sets. Grinding all of them. Grinding all the Echoes. Grinding all the 3 costs, the 1 cost, the 4 costs. And then you're rolling all of them to get double crit. Spending all of your tuners, all of your tubes, all of your resources right before we have a patch with 3 new limited characters. We have a patch with 3 new limited characters, and I'm out here because I'm a guide maker rolling 2 new Sonata sets for a unit that doesn't even have that many teams. For a unit that is not actually that meta relevant. For a unit that requires some of the most like precise and like whale-oriented spending habits ever to even be useful on your account. This is like the epitome of a whale unit. I think that's the best way to describe it. She is a whale unit. Because you need a fuck ton of premium characters for her to be good. And you also need a fuck ton of Echoes to even build her. A fuck ton of resources to even build her. She's got no good free-to-play weapon options. She's got no good free-to-play teammates. She needs Mornier. She needs Amenth. And this might be like the big one over here. Remember how I like kind of talked about how shit her weapon is? Bro. Or shit her weapon options are? Bro, her weapon is like insane too. It buffs the team's attack by 24%. Denia is going to be really, 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 really good and really, really, really strong on the teams that she's good in. But she's only going to be good in a couple of teams with like 2 characters. That is terrible account value. And the 2 characters that she's good with, Linnae's already good with them to an acceptable degree in the first place. Maybe she's a character that's going to age a lot better with time, grow a lot more in use cases. Maybe there'll be DPSs that increase their own off-tune build-up rate so she releases her separation from Mornier. But the reality is, right now, ladies and gentlemen, she is probably the biggest bait I've ever seen in the history of gacha. I would actually recommend that 95%, if not more, of players should probably actually just be skipping her. For the sake of your account, for the sake of your resources, for the sake of everything, your sanity, all of that, you probably should be skipping her. Because I don't think, especially with units like Linnea in the game, especially with all the other characters that are going to be coming out, I don't think that she's a good pull right now. Because guess what Denia's going to do in the future? She'll do this thing called rerun. She will come back because she is a limited unit, but she's not a collaboration unit. These are collaboration units. We don't know whether or not they're ever going to come back. We don't know if their weapon's going to come back. We don't know if their Sonata set is going to come back either. It probably should. It would suck if their Sonata set was limited. You don't want to go empty. You don't want to blow all of your budget, all of your savings on a character that's this restricted when there's this much good stuff potentially on the horizon. Don't get buyer's remorse, because this unit will be an infinite. Guaranteed this unit is going to be an infinite source of it. And I've given you all the reasons for why. Let me know what you all thought. Peace out.